Good evening to everybody. My name is Rick Tryon. I'm the director of the Taylor Leadership Institute, and on behalf of the Institute, it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening for the Leadership Speakers Bureau featuring our University President, John Delaney. And I think we have an interesting program in store ahead for you tonight, but I'm going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker here. Not that the President needs an icebreaker, but this day in history. Significant events that occurred on the 14th of March. Albert Einstein was born in 1879 in Ulm, Germany. Alexander Hamilton was commissioned as a captain in the Continental Army in 1776 and was placed in command of a New York artillery company. John Jack Mack, the founder of Mack Truck, tragically but ironically was killed in an automobile accident. Mikhail Gorbachev was elected the last president of the Soviet Union in 1990. Billy Crystal was born on this date also in 1948, and I'm not sure how much he and Einstein have in common. And of course, this is the eve of the Ides of March, which we all remember from our English literature Shakespearean studies, as the date Julius Caesar was stabbed in the Roman Senate and assassinated. What many don't know is that was actually the second attempt on his life that day. The first coming during a banquet preceding the meeting of the Senate, where Cassius and Brutus slipped hemlock leaves into Julius Caesar's, into the emperor's salad. And that's probably the first ever Caesar salad. But so after swallowing the first mouthful, Caesar exclaimed that there was hemlock in his food, to which Brutus feigned ignorance and concern and asked Julius how many leaves he had eaten. And Caesar replied with his now famous line, "Ate two, Brute." Okay. No English lit students over here. Clearly, I tried that on my staff earlier. June, I knew you would get it. So I'm going to quit while I'm behind, okay? And move forward from here. So tonight we have a unique opportunity to hear directly from the University President on a subject that he knows quite a bit about, leadership. And each of you should have a copy in your program of our President's bio. Also, as a reminder for our students who are here tonight, please fill out the evaluation form that came with your program. We ask you to drop it off at the table in the back so that we can tally the results of our performance, but any of the tables in the back as you move toward your reception area afterwards. And before I introduce our President and begin this evening's program, I'd like to take just a minute and recognize some of the special guests that we have here in the audience with us, and in no particular order. And I'll start with the lady in the back of the room, our Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Pam Challey. Representing Student Affairs, we have the Vice President, Dr. Lucy Croft, the Associate Vice President. And from the Student Affairs Community Council, we have John Lucas, Bruce Ogier, Bill Norris, and Dave Reed. Okay. The Dean of the Library, Dr. Elizabeth Curry. The Dean of Graduate Studies, the Power Team, Dr. John Kantner. Not there. Okay, and from the Military and Veterans Resource Center, and I haven't seen them show up yet. Where are you hiding at? Okay. The Director, Captain Bob Bjorn. And I saw the Director of the International Center, Ruth Lopez, earlier. Ruth, are you there yet? Over there. And also joining us, the Director of the Center for Professional Development and Training, and my friend Kelly Harrison. From the Environmental Leadership Program, Maria Mark. Okay. And I haven't seen Cheryl Gomez yet, from Director of Equal Opportunity. I'm looking right at her, for heaven's sake. There you are. I said, I'm sorry. Cheryl, I had eye surgery this week, and that's my excuse. I'm staying with it, so, okay. Dr. Diane Taylor, Leadership Professor, author, TLI staff emeritus, and TED Talk coach for TEDx Jacksonville is here with us tonight as well. And I think we have Miss Jill Dame. Jill, is Jill here? She's coming from across town. Jill is the CEO of Leadership Jacks, and she was excited to join us, but I think traffic is getting in her way. And then we have the Associate Director for the Commission on Diversity and Inclusion, Opa Siane. Opa, if you're here, welcome. And so with that, I think I'll stop in the interest of time and protocol, although at the risk of missing somebody who maybe slipped in under the radar undetected. So next, I want to acknowledge a group that is very special, and I want to say thanks to them, and that's my staff, the team of the Leadership Institute. And I'll start with my director, my assistant director, John Frank. Dr. Frank, you in the room? In the back, okay. Events coordinator, Corey Hilliard. Outreach coordinator, Corinne Stukes. And our office manager, Lori Stanton. Lori. Faculty coordinator and liaison from the College of Education, Dr. Matt Olson. And let's see, we have our 2 federal work-study student assistants, Johnny Ballard and Heidi Andrada, who are here as well. And a particular shout out to Corey. Corey did most of the heavy lifting for getting this event off the ground. So Corey, another great job. The Leadership Minor administered by the Taylor Leadership Institute is an academic program that is really unique to the University of North Florida. Each year, approximately 600 students take the Introduction to Leadership elective, which is the gateway course for the minor. Those who continue on and successfully complete the additional course of study are awarded the minor upon graduation. And here with us tonight, we have Dr. Frank's practicum class representing those students who will be graduating this spring with the minor. And so at this time, I'd like to ask the practicum students to please stand up. Okay. So now before I move on and introduce our featured speaker, I want to acknowledge someone near and dear to the University of North Florida and the namesake of the University Leadership Institute, Dr. Bruce Taylor, who's here accompanied by his wife, June. Dr. Taylor is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, who, among other things, during his stint in the Navy, went on to become the operations officer for the USS Hado, a nuclear-powered fast attack submarine. And if you'd like to know what it's like to be strapped into a metal harness, tethered to a chain into the bridge of a submarine in 40-foot high seas during a winter crossing of the Atlantic, trying to repair a periscope, see Bruce right afterwards, okay? He can tell you about that. A leader and an innovator, he is the founder and CEO of Taylor Engineering, and the past chairman of the University of North Florida's Board of Trustees. Dr. Taylor, along with Dr. Mauricio Gonzalez, with the support of President Delaney, provided the impetus for what has become the Taylor Leadership Institute, a center of excellence for leadership learning at the University of North Florida. So Bruce, can I call upon you now to perhaps give us a few words of wisdom as the namesake of the Institute?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. I've been introducing John Delaney for 15 years. He balked at that in the beginning. Now he just accepts it, I guess. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to talk briefly about my naval career, which started in 1958 when I went down to the Norwegian Seamen's Union in Baltimore at age 16 and signed up to go to sea. And I went. God knows how my mother and father allowed me to go, but I did. And we went to Cuba. And Castro was in the hills in Cuba fighting Batista. And I got through that, but I did learn to love Cuba Libres. So when I came back, I enlisted in the Navy and began my illustrious career. So it was. Not nearly as illustrious as General Tryon's, but I loved every bit of it. It was a great experience. And it taught me a lot about leadership. Leadership is a funny thing. It's not one single thing. It's many things. And it's built around your personal ethics and your core values. How you live your life, how you treat other people, how you care for them, how you foster them, mentor them. It's a lot of things like that. It's very personal. So when you study and read about leadership, those of you taking the course and the minor, think about those things because they are what drives your success as a leader. It's not about you. It never is about you. It's about the people you have responsibility for, to see that they achieve, that they grow, and they become good human beings that can inspire and bring together a group to achieve great things. And that's basically what leadership is about. And when it's all said and done, they get the credit. You don't. I mean that. That's the way that it goes. So that was my one 15-second talk on leadership. But I have the privilege tonight, once again, to introduce a great leader. A great leader. John and I came to the university about the same time. I was appointed to the Board of Trustees by Governor Jeb Bush, and John was elected by the Board of Trustees as our new president. And he has done an amazing job in that capacity. He truly has. And I was fortunate enough to follow Carol Thompson as the chair of the board. I think I hung out for about 8 years in that capacity, and a few more years after that before I went off the board. They kicked me off. But John is a great president. And early on, when I took over the chairmanship, we started talking about leadership. We started talking about the absence, the visible absence of courses or opportunities in higher education, just like this one, where the students could be exposed to personal, think about your own personal ethics and values and how they relate to how you relate to others, how you were seen by others. And over the time we started talking about this, I slipped in the comment, John, we ought to do this. And by God, we did. And with Dr. Gonzalez's help and others, Dr. Frank came in. It has been a wonderful experience, and one that is to see this today from where we started, to me, is extremely gratifying. And I want to thank all of you, but I personally want to thank President Delaney, who's not only a good colleague, he's a dear friend and a great president. So I would like to turn it over to him.
Okay. Dr. Taylor, thanks very much for highlighting our featured speaker tonight. He really needs no introduction, as you effectively said. He's got a portfolio that's eye-watering, and I would just spotlight one or two things in his incredible career, and you've got his portfolio in the program. But this gentleman has so many significant accomplishments. Served with distinction as the General Counsel for the City of Jacksonville, the Chief Assistant State Attorney, the #2 Prosecutor for Northeast Florida, twice elected as the Mayor of Jacksonville, and 15 years as the President of the University of North Florida. And this past month, the Florida House of Representatives passed a joint House Resolution 8061 commending President Delaney for his extraordinary achievements as the president of the University of North Florida. So kind of segueing off of Dr. Taylor, ladies and gentlemen, once again, please join me in welcoming our university president.
Thanks, General, and thanks, Bruce. You hear these kind of accolades. A lot of people are too young to remember this, but Burt Reynolds was one of the biggest movie stars in the world in the 70s and 80s. I mean, every movie he made was this blockbuster hit. He was just sort of box office gold, and he was sexiest man of the world, and he posed as a centerfold for Playgirl, or Cosmopolitan, something like that, you know. And they had a scene in one of his movies where he's kissing the actress Jill Clayburgh, and she moans and she groans, and he's kissing and kissing, and she groans a little more and starts to swoon, and he finally stops and pulls back and says, "Look, I'm really not that good." And it's kind of how I feel too about that. And I want to thank Bruce. It's clear we've become dear friends. Bruce's roommate, college roommate at the Naval Academy, was a naval pilot, and occasionally I'll get in some emails. We'll swap jokes around, and the roommate will say how important the naval aviator is to modern warfare, and Bruce will counter that it's the submariner that really wins wars, and it's sort of a fun interchange. They get mad at each other, as a matter of fact, on these emails. And one of our student body presidents was a Marine, and it was fun to see Bruce and this Marine tell dumb sailor, dumb Marine jokes back and forth that could go on for hours. A couple things I wanted to convey, and just up front, is that there's really, well, number one, Bruce encapsulated at the core what it takes to be a good leader. And it's something that he preached in his years on the board, and particularly as chair, about honor and dignity and character and honesty and those kinds of things. And without those, it just doesn't really pay necessarily to be a leader. But a second thing I would throw in there is there's a lot of different styles to be a leader. And so I'll talk about presidents or political figures. Set aside whether you like their politics or not in terms of a style of leadership. Our current governor, Rick Scott, is really very much an introvert. And he's not what you'd call a people person. But he wills himself to do that. He overcomes that particular thing and to govern. Jeb Bush, on the other hand, was an extreme extrovert. 18 hours a day, he wanted people around him, bouncing ideas off. And a lot of times I'll measure the leader over whether they are effective or not. And Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, I don't necessarily share all of his politics, and he gets downgraded by historians and political scientists because of the Vietnam War. But in terms of his domestic agenda, he accomplished virtually anything he wanted. He kind of willed his way on through. I don't think there's another American president with a domestic agenda that was as successful as his. So it comes at it. There's just different styles. And a lot of people are natural at it. A lot of it have to force themselves to overcome some issues. Sort of the third broad theme that I would toss out is that I have always liked a climate around me that the direct reports to me are comfortable disagreeing with me or saying to me, you know, you've lost your damn mind. And I've trained myself to not react and want to bite back, because if I do that, they won't do that again. And I read about a CEO years ago that said, very successful, it was a hospital chain, and it was actually a woman, and she said, I've learned that if everybody else in the room disagrees with me, then I'm usually wrong. And I've learned the same thing, that sometimes even when I'm certain I'm right, if the people that I trust and that I ask to try to give me advice and recommendations, if they disagree, I'm probably going down a wrong path. Probably. Every now and then I'll overrule that group. And I call on a great quote of Lincoln's, that Lincoln had a vote with his cabinet, and he said, there's 7 ayes and 1 nay. The nays have it. And when you're the boss, you get to kind of make that call. But I think thematically, if you can encourage people around you to disagree with you, leadership and management really is about decision making. And so the more creative options you can have presented to you, it means you're going to make a better decision. But if people are afraid to tell you an idea because you shoot it down or you bite their head off or they're afraid to disagree with you, it's going to be very, very hard to be a particularly good leader. And I've actually, really, the 3 different careers I've had, that's what I've spent the time to do, is to make sure the team around me that I really trust and have a lot of faith in. And they're very, very different people. If everybody sitting at the table, you know, is a white male that went to the University of Florida and came from a middle-class family, you're probably going to have a limited set of options. But if you have women at the table and you have other races at the table, you have different age groups, different backgrounds, there's new perspectives that get presented, and it makes you a much, much better leader. And so I think with that, General, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Wow. Any questions? You almost covered the waterfront on that one. We've kicked around the definition of leadership here a little bit. Dr. Taylor talked about leadership, and certainly you've talked about leadership through your perspective. Who is the epitome of a leader from your perspective, and why?
Well, really kind of a personal mentor to me was the state attorney and the mayor that I worked for, a man named Ed Austin. And he carried with him all of the characteristics that Bruce described. There was a dignity about the man. It was about, again, we were prosecutors, and he would call the office all together in a big jury room, and he'd have a yellow legal pad. He'd go through it, and at the end of his talks, you'd want to go through a wall for the guy. But what he always presented there was your duty to be fair and to be just as a prosecutor. You can't prosecute somebody unless you're certain that they're guilty. Defense lawyers have to take people whether they're guilty or not, but a prosecutor has to really be convinced of that. And what he cautioned against was the overzealous prosecutor, the people that want to just lock them up and throw away the key just because you got enough proof to be able to do that. And often the decision to drop a case or to ask for probation as opposed to jail time is a tough call to make. And he used to frequently quote Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who said that the most frightening words in any languages are "you are under arrest." And he really impressed upon you the importance of what you're doing. You're dealing with human beings' lives, whether they're the victims or whether those that have been accused. And he was just a phenomenal role model. And still every day there's what we call an Edism. There's some quote or something that he's got that kind of helps me think through an issue.
So,
Kind of one other thing on that.
Sure.
I think the other thing that was unique about him is that we'd have a meeting in the afternoon to decide what to do. It may have been a management decision. It may have been about an important case or something we were going to the grand jury or even a death penalty case. And he'd come in the next morning and he will have changed his mind. And you go, well, this is what you said yesterday. And he'd go, that was yesterday. Today is today. And he wasn't afraid to change his mind. He'd process all night long. He'd kind of weigh in other factors to try to do that. And many people that I see in leadership positions, that they're cocksure of themselves. And I can't say that I'm that way, that even often the most obvious decisions, whether it's on moral grounds or whatever, keep going back, is that the right one? Could I have made that any better? What else should I have thought about? And I think if you're too cocksure in your decision making, I especially see this with elected officials, they don't understand the consequences of a decision. They just like a philosophy and they're going to cram this thing on through. So I think kind of having a nature of second guessing yourself, I think, is also healthy.
okay. So with that as kind of a backdrop, do you believe leadership is a natural talent, or is leadership something that can be learned? And if it can be learned, what in your judgment is the best way to teach leadership?
So is it inbred or can you learn? The answer is yes. I mean, I do think a lot of people just have a natural gift, and you know, sometimes you can see it in third grade on a playground, who's kind of organizing kids and that kind of a thing. And that doesn't mean that they grow and mature through life necessarily, but I do think a lot of people are very natural with it. And just like some people are, you know, naturally gifted public speakers or naturally gifted shooting a basketball or swinging a baseball bat, but that doesn't mean that you can't train yourself, as I alluded to earlier, that there aren't things that you can't work through. I think some of the first things you got to do is to recognize your weaknesses as well as your strengths. And if you can do that, if you can build that management team, if you can create a culture where people present you with other options and more creative ways to handle a problem, I think anybody can be a leader. And as I said, contrast with the presidents, the styles are totally different. You know, Jimmy Carter was very much a detail guy. Ronald Reagan was quitting at 5 o'clock and having a scotch, you know, and he did it as a 40-hour week. People are all very different, so it doesn't mean there's one cookie-cutter style that fits. It really needs to be adapted to each individual to bring out your own strengths. When I first came to UNF, the VPs were coming in, you know, what do you want me to call you, and how am I supposed to behave, and, you know, how do you want certain things done? And I said, my job is to work around your strengths and work with your strengths and work around your weaknesses. And so I don't really have a style. And Bruce knows, all the vice presidents, even to this day, that they're all very different people with very different styles, but they're willing to be open and kind of, you know, offer ideas.
So as the new president of the University of North Florida in 2003, what did you see as your greatest leadership challenge?
I'm what's known as a non-traditional president, which means I don't come from the academy. I don't come from a university. Most presidents, start as a professor. They get a dissertation. They get a PhD. They get tenure. They get promoted. They become a chair. They become a dean. They become a provost, and then apply for a president. And roughly 5% of the presidents come from non-traditional means. Some are military generals that have been selected, or admirals, and some come from the business sector, some from the political sector. And so a lot of it was to convince the campus that I'm going to listen, that I'm not crazy, that I respect academic culture, and an academic setting is different than the private sector and the public sector in an awful lot of ways. A lot of similarities too, but that was the big thing I think I needed to really kind of convey, that I was going to get input from primarily faculty. I think the students and the staff had a little different response.
So what do you believe in the time that you've been at the university, what do you believe to be your most significant accomplishment, and why?
On any given day, I kind of come up with, I'd have a different answer. Almost half the buildings on campus are brand new, and about a quarter of the buildings, or half of the remaining, have been renovated. This is a fairly new building right here. Actually, this floor came about. One of the things that we did years ago, that involves Bruce, is and this is something I got from Ed Austin. He always used to say, somebody in this country is doing it better than we are. And so he would send teams out to visit other prosecutors' offices, and then later other mayoral offices, other cities, to say, okay, how are they doing it? What programs do they have? And inevitably, we'd come back and say, well, we're doing better than them, but they've got these two things they're doing that we don't do. And I think that consistently looking for new ways and new ideas. And so we, early on, and it was at really the board's direction, they said, give us some aspirational peer schools. Come up with schools that are better at us at some things. And so the chief of staff at UNF, Tom Soroka, went through a whole series of sieves and screens to find schools roughly our size, roughly the same kind of a mission. And then we began visiting those schools. And after the first couple of years, Bruce and some board members also came along. And we visited two in the Baltimore area. Bruce and June grew up in Baltimore, and they have a very nice condo up there. And he had us to dinner at the Johns Hopkins Club. And they had a really cool faculty lounge and a setting. And so we added to this floor. We were in the design on this thing down below, and we added an entire floor to be able to have this kind of a convening space and a space for faculty to be able to gather in kind of a lounge area over there. So you come back from all those visits picking up a little something.
So this space happens to be the Terrell Leadership Institute's favorite space, and so I'm not surprised that that's the history behind it. So has the concept of shared governance, has that process helped or hindered you in your various leadership initiatives?
I wouldn't say it's hindered. It may slow it down a little bit. The concept of shared governance is that at a university, the faculty, the staff, and the students all kind of own the university. And the administrators are only there temporarily, but kind of the body itself carries forward. So any of the significant decisions have to also get at least consulted with faculty, staff, and students. And so there's mechanisms to provide that input. And at first couple of months, your first year, you really don't want to do anything big as a president. That's the guideline. Listen, get the culture, find the vibes. Don't try to do a dramatic change until you really are sure that the university is ready for that kind of a change. And I realized that it just slowed it down a little bit. It was not dissimilar to, frankly, when I was mayor. In City Hall, you've got a co-equal branch of government that you have to consult. They have to approve whatever you do. You really can't do anything as an elected official unless the community is behind you in one way or another. And so I realized it was really a lot more similar than not. Often on campuses, we say our culture is completely different than the rest of the world, and it's a lot different in a lot of ways. But my assistant, Sherry, has been with me since 1985. All of the moves, she's come along, and she's going out the door the same day that I am. And after we'd been here a couple months, she says, they say it's different, but it's really not all that different. An org chart's an org chart. Management's management, leadership's leadership, budgets are budgets. Talking to people is, having meetings, there's a lot of those similarities. And in a lot of ways, a law firm is got the same kind of a shared governance sort of a thing. Medical practices, engineering firms, that the people that kind of are shareholders in it, they've got somebody that they've maybe selected to run the organization. It's 7 years up or out, much akin to tenure before you become, say, a law partner. So there's a lot of similarities there. The difference is in law firms, engineering firms, and medical practices, their primary interest is about making money, which is not really what's going on here. Here, the faculty really feel an ownership of the university and spend a good bit of their time engaged in what's known as service, which is to participate in that.
Sir, how has social media affected you as a leader, both as the mayor of the city of Jacksonville and as the president of the university?
Not much. It probably should. I'm kind of coming to grips with the fact that newspapers, local media are really secondary and tertiary sources of news as opposed to social media. And so, fortunately, there's people on campus that understand it better than I. You know, when you're at the top, you don't necessarily be technically proficient in anything. You just need to know you got people that are around you. And so I think there's going to be a lot of impacts in the future, and I think the new president is going to have to really kind of engage and confront that as well.
As a senior leader, the mayor of a major metropolitan area, as the president of a university, one of the challenges I think we see is this notion of executive isolation. How do you overcome executive isolation and remain in contact with the folks that you're leading and the mission that you're trying to advance?
Yeah, and that concept is very, very true, and it can happen even when you're engaged in meetings all day. If you kind of have this yes man, yes woman culture where that's what you want is people patting you on the back. We see that in some elected office right now that kind of stroking the ego is an important way to survive, and the tops of the organizations of some of our elected officials. And so my old boss, Ed Austin, used to quote Gorbachev. He said of Gorbachev, Reagan quoted to Gorbachev a Russian saying that was trust but verify. You kind of have to kind of go and gut check and have differing inputs. I say at virtually every meeting on this campus that I've got an open door, I respond to every email, I'm open to a meeting. Usually I'm able to have a meeting within 24 hours of a request. Fortunately, not all 20,000 people on this campus ask for a meeting every single day, because that'd be hard to do. But trying to make sure that you've got your ears hearing different things, I think, is really, really important.
Okay. So what leadership advice would you give to our graduating students?
I think I probably kind of have. I mean, I think there's sort of three elements to you can put numbers and rank things, but the idea that if you're going to lead, you first need to listen. You need to understand. You need to kind of organize the right options. You need to decide. You've got to pick a decision. If you're a bad decider, you're going to be a bad leader. And the third is something that often gets dropped, which is you've got to be able to implement. And that means you've got a management structure that can carry out what you have decided. I've seen governors that come up with these great ideas and have a big governors, mayors, presidents. They have a great press conference. They announce this thing. They get some headlines, and then nothing ever happens. And it's because they haven't created a structure to make sure that it's implemented. And so I think if you listen, I think if you surround yourself with people that will give you feedback on various options, if you kind of trust the judgment of your leadership group, I think you can be a good leader.
Okay. So what's the best leadership book you've ever read, and why?
I knew that was coming, and I've actually tried to think about that. I don't think I've got one. I try to pick up, business books are cranked out all the time, business leadership and management books, and I try to get kind of 2 a year, usually in the summer. It's always something stimulating that's in there. I love to read. Frankly, fiction helps. I think reading fiction can round you out a little bit. I love reading histories and biographies, and biographies of presidents. I've probably got about biographies of about half of the presidents, and it's just sort of fascinating to read about their lives and then their styles, how different they were. One of the ones that I keep, and I read this thing 15 years ago, and it still goes back, it's one of the better biographies I've ever read, was on Ulysses Grant. I hadn't really known this particular thing, but we know that he was reputed to have an alcohol problem, got drummed out of the Army for alcohol, was dead broke in the late 1850s and 1860, had to beg his father, which he had a strained relationship with, for a job. His father was a fairly successful businessman. He had a tannery in Illinois that Ulysses Grant went to work for. He hated the job, wasn't very good at it, didn't work very hard at it. But he was a complete abject failure at that point in time. By the early 1862, he'd won the first significant battles of the Civil War. appointed general of the armies a year or two later, essentially is considered one of the better generals in the history of generalship. And then in 1868 was elected president. So he went from failure to president of the United States in an 8-year period, and had a very spotty presidential career, mostly because he really trusted people too much. And he had some people that were just crooked, that were trying to steal money from him. Got out of that, worked with an investment firm, had a partner that stole all that money. He ended up broke again, and dying of throat cancer, he ended up writing an autobiography that, among most historians, is considered the best presidential autobiography that's ever been written. And you don't have to read much of it to see how fluid of a writer he really was, and he was that way as a general. That's kind of a fun book to read, because there's a lot of things to draw out of that, different elements. I mean, 8-year period ago, he was selling firewood on the streets of St. Louis, and 8 years later was president. I mean, and won a war in the middle of that. Yeah.
That's a great book. One of the things I remember from that book in particularly is that when Grant went to General Sherman's funeral, he was famous for saying, "I took care of him when he was half crazy. He took care of me when I was half drunk." And so it was maybe the dream team. I don't know.
I think it was the other way around. I think Sherman said it about Grant, but it was the same thought, yeah.
I think we're going to open the floor now to question and answer from the audience. But as a prologue to that, let me ask you if there's anything that you wish as a leader that you would have done differently during your tenure as the president.
Probably continue to work more on that shared governance, getting input. You can never do enough of that. You know, that's the problem with management, is that you can always have one more meeting. There's always one more memo to read. There's always one more memo to reread, and that's why you're there later and later at night. You know, you always think faster, better, quicker, cheaper. You know, those one more story on this building. You know, there's always something like that. And but once it's done, that's what I try to. I do one last second guess. Can I get a lesson out of that? And then you just kind of have to live with it. I often say in a crisis, I actually enjoy it. Enjoy a crisis. Don't take that wrong. I enjoy making decisions in a crisis because in a crisis, you've got a limited amount of time to really think out all the consequences. And so you typically have a few different options. You just make the best one you can, and then you just go, hey, I did the best I could with the information that I had. And one of my favorite quotes is from the Russian writer Chekhov. Not the Star Trek one, but the Russian writer. And he said, any fool can handle a crisis. It's the day-to-day living that gets you. I think that's a good quote.
Okay, at this time, I think we want to open the floor to questions from the audience. And I am told that some of the students have questions beyond what you provided me here earlier. So please don't be shy. This is your opportunity to
First one's always
cross-examine.
The brave person's the first one.
Okay, Levi, good on you. Levi is one of my students in the introduction course to leadership, and he is a declared leadership minor.
Yes. President Delaney, I was just wondering how you would like to see the study of leadership continue to grow at the University of North Florida.
Well, you know, Bruce sort of did the introduction to it, kind of how the concept came up, and Vice President of Student Affairs Mauricio Gonzalez is who then provided shape to it. And then Bruce doesn't let it, if ever there's a period where it drifts, Bruce comes in and kind of pokes us a little bit, because we actually surprised him at one of the big board events with that we wanted to name it after him, and it was sort of a unanimous decision of the staff, and so we're really kind of honored to do that. So I think we've got a great leader in the general here to kind of continue to do it, and there's always more to learn with it, and it's very, very important, because not a lot of places do this. Not a lot of places try to teach it, and I'd love to see how it's operated.
Thank you.
That answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Carly Gordon.
Hi, President Delaney. Thank you so much for your time tonight. If you could go back to 2003 and tell yourself one piece of advice of how to lead the University of North Florida, what would you tell yourself?
Maybe try to get home earlier a couple nights a week. You know?
The traffic is killer, yeah.
I put on a lot of weight, so you know it's. Yeah, I have not ever really been good on time management, and like I said, there's always one more meeting, one more phone call, you know, one more email to kind of think about or rewrite. So I probably would have tried a little more work-life balance, and I'm sure as soon as I walk out of here, I said, "Here's 4 bad decisions I made. I should have admitted that I've made, but right now they're not really coming. I'm sure I did, but I'm not hitting the reset button on some of my. You know, much like I said about making a decision of crisis. Draw from it what you can, and then you just got to move on and say, okay, hey, that's how it went. That's a tough question, yeah.
So like finding a balance between work and play and stuff.
Yeah. Fortunately, I've got a really good wife, so that I could have stayed another hour. Maybe it would have been better. I don't really know, but yeah, I think you know, my dad with my brothers and I, it was get there early, stay there late, go in on the weekend, this kind of a thing, and that advice still stands. I mean, I still think that's the way to go. But I probably could have trimmed an hour a day out of that and done something different with that hour if I'd managed it a little tighter. That's probably going back to law school, too, for that matter. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
Okay, over to you.
I was just wondering if there was any events or experiences you had when you were in college that shaped you as a leader.
Yeah, and this isn't for everybody, but I joined a fraternity, and the fraternity, it's actually the oldest major fraternity, and it's non-sectarian, non-hazing, and it's non-secret. And I'm not sure I would have joined another one, but I ran the kitchen for a year. I was treasurer. I was president, and then got involved with a version of student government down in Gainesville known as Florida Blue Key. And that's really often a microcosm for the real world, the politics of this Florida Blue Key organization. I was elected president of that. Trading votes, those kinds of things. Those are real worldish kind of things. Now, and often students will say, you know, what do you think? What we told our kids is that join something. Get involved with at least one, hopefully two. And whether it's a club or, you know, whatever it happens to be, some activity or organization, and you'll be the better for it. You know, college is more than just the book and the classrooms and the professors, and you know, sometimes it's just the bowl sessions at night. I've got a paper I wrote that was a result of kind of a late night conversation on African economic development. That was because of those kind of sessions. So meeting people, those kinds of things. I think it's that college experience is important as much as anything. I mean, most of us don't have probably a lot of facts that we remember from college all these years later. You know, I mean, I've got a few dates. I was a history major that just stick in my head because they do, but it's really about the way you think. So those kinds of experiences, I think, make that experience better. If anything, I wish I did more of that back then. You know, kind of going back to your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question, and it's a shameless plug now for the experiential learning transcript that we have as part of our leadership minor, where we take the co-curricular dynamic, which is probably equally as important with what we learn in the classroom, the academic, the curricular, and then bringing those two together. And Dr. Frank is the duty expert when it comes to the experiential learning transcript that all of our leadership minors are working so hard to complete right now. But great question. Thank you for that.
Hi. What advice would you give to faculty and staff and even students as we transition into a new president and a new form of leadership?
Give him a chance. I think this guy's going to be a winner. I mean, he played basketball at the UNC Asheville. He's a competitive guy, and he's 6'5". He's got a great presence about him. You know, dean of a business school. He appreciates the liberal arts and the other colleges that we have. So that's kind of it. Give him a chance. He's a real hard worker. I think he's going to have an open door and is going to be open to people coming in. And I think he's more disciplined on time than me. You know, but I think everybody's going to like him. I think we really picked a winner. I wasn't involved with it, but I think the board picked a winner.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Okay.
What do you think is the best way to determine your own weaknesses as a leader?
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
What is the best way to determine your weaknesses as a leader?
And that's a really hard thing psychologically to do. But it's really to ask other people, you know, what do you think I'm good at and what do you think I'm not so good at? And you've really got to kind of take a deep breath to hear whatever that criticism is and then decide if you want to change it or not. You know, some people are going to say, hey, that's just me, I'm not changing that. And often a strength is a weakness and a weakness is a strength. It can have two sides to it. So, you know, it'd be probably talking to friends, talking to faculty, what observations they have, and telling them you'd appreciate if they were candid. not cruel, but candid, and go from there. I think there's a thing known as a 360 that we did some years ago at UNF, and what's a danger in my position is that everything that gets typed down is a public record. And so I kind of took a deep breath, and the outside consultant came in, interviewed the people that report to me, interviewed deans and other people to try to provide feedback up on, hey, here's some things that you need to change. And there were some good ones. Some good things came out of that. And I had to say, hey, you know what? That would be better to do it that way than rather this way. And in that case, people were liberated because they knew their name wouldn't be attached to it. So depending on kind of where you are, in that case, we actually brought somebody in from outside to do that work. You know, at your stage, et cetera, probably would be talking to friends, roommates, people down the hall, that kind of a thing.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
Okay.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Barely. Get real close to that mic. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you. Perfect. Oh, not this high. Okay. Okay, I think that's good. Oh, good evening. My question is, are there any things, priorities that you wanted to accomplish in your time here that you haven't? And if so, do you believe they will be accomplished with the next leadership?
Yeah, the big thing I wanted to do from a building standpoint, I described it, we wanted the campus to mature. You know, UNF was basically a night school up into the middle 1980s. And we didn't have dorms, didn't have athletics. And then that shifted through the 90s, and now we have the third highest percentage of students going full-time of the universities in the state, third behind Florida and Florida State. And so the athletic program moved from Division II to Division I. We had a whole bunch of portables on the site of the current student union because the school had been growing. We couldn't get the buildings quick enough. We hadn't been getting our share of the construction dollars. And so I kind of described the maturing of the campus. And I really wanted to build an interfaith center, a place that could be used for worship for students, that because, you know, we're kind of the whole of a donut and we're surrounded by a nature preserve. You know, most campuses have a main street, and across the street are bookstores and pizza places and restaurants and clothing stores. Well, we don't have that. We kind of have to import it. And so for a lot of students, I think a place to be able to go and think and pray, et cetera, would be good. And so we have an interfaith center that's designed that was going to go behind the lake, behind the Herbert University Center, kind of jut out over it, a bunch of glass around it, and we're about $1.5 million short. I thought it'd be easier to raise money for it than it was. We've been working on that for 10 years. So that's one thing I really feel bad that we haven't quite been able to get it over the line. And I think the new president would want to continue it. I think he's going to want it. It's on my list to talk to him about. Yeah.
It's a beautiful campus. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
And there's always one more thing for you to do.
There always is.
There's always
yeah,
one
yeah.
more thing.
And if there isn't, then you haven't reached far enough. You know,
That's right,
you need to
yeah.
make that list and kind of push it through. And appreciate her comments on the beauty of the place too. That I've been on all the college campuses. This is by far the public university is the prettiest campus out there, and probably the person that's changed the campus more than me, someone that many might not even know. His name's Chuck Hubbock, and he's the landscape architect that we hired to come in here, and he's who did all this wonderful landscaping. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. We had, when I got here, my observation was the buildings we had on campus looked like they were designed by 1960s Soviet architects. You know, they were really ugly. But you can, with the right landscaping and additions, you can kind of spiff them up. So we tried to do all the new buildings, both aesthetically and functionally, really at the high end. And so a lot of our buildings, almost all of our new buildings, have received awards from architects and engineering firms for the designs and the construction. Appreciate your comment.
Yeah, great comment. And in the spirit of true leadership, giving credit where credit is due, and it's oftentimes on the shoulders of our staff that such great things get done. Sir?
How do you deal with adversities in your personal life without giving up?
How do you deal with adversity in your personal life
Yeah.
without giving up?
So I'll sort of put that adversity into two buckets. One is when you're a leader or in a leadership position, you're going to get criticized. And one of the things that I was stunned about myself to discover is that my skin was pretty thick. And, you know, Jacksonville is the 13th biggest city in population in the country because the county and the city are combined. And so there's some really crazy, nasty people out there. And I used to get a kicker out reading the comments after a newspaper article because there'd be some wackos in there, you know. And every now and then you kind of go, that one really hurt. But you've got to kind of, if you just think you did the right job, you got to kind of live with that criticism, you know. On the personal side, I had a conversation with my oldest daughter years ago. She doesn't even remember it, but we were sitting in my car in front of my house, and she told me how I had ruined her entire life in that conversation, and everything that I was wrong as a parent, you know. And so, but I talked to her about, and she grew up after that. It was a great relationship. She's the mother of my 3 grandkids, lives 5 blocks away, thinks I'm the greatest guy in the world. I still can't believe she didn't remember that conversation, but and I said, okay, let's take each of our problems, and let's draw a box right here, put it here, and then draw a line over to how we'd like that to be. And you can do that in a lot of aspects of your life. I've got a bad knee that needs knee replacement, so bad knee replacement, so physical therapy, knee replacement, get it fixed, you know, that's kind of in the end. And draw out where you want to get to. And I've done an exercise, I don't think I've mentioned it in tonight, what I call the utopia exercise, which, and you can do this in a lot of elements, which is, in a perfect world, how would blank look? You know, the history department. Perfect history department would be how big, how many students, how much money, how many scholarships, what kind of library, how many classrooms. And okay, let's see how close we can get to that. And so you can kind of do that even, you know, in your own life. I got this health problem. You know, I had this breakup with a girlfriend or a boyfriend. How do I get over this kind of a thing? And, you know, find a new one. It's in that box on the end. And then map out what it would take to kind of get you over there. And then, depending how deep it is, you know, make sure you got somebody to talk to about it. Because I often say on campus that any student, no matter what problem you've got, no matter what it is, parent murdered, parent with cancer, no matter what it is, we've got somebody here to help you with it. And we've seen it before. And so, and that's often the hard part, is to reach out to say to somebody, hey, help me on this, I need some help. And email me if I can help, or call.
It's part of that Renee Brown vulnerability thing that we talk about so much in our leadership classes, I think. Hunter.
Hi. So my question's similar to the previous one, but it was too late to sit back down, so here it is. So throughout your career, how have you, what's been your relationship and experience with failure, especially in a leadership position, and how have you overcome those failures or less than perfect outcomes, and how has that kind of helped you grow?
Question.
Number one, try to draw a lesson from it. Is there something I should have done differently? And number two, forget about it. You know, they have a line in football about the secondary, which is the defense trying to stop the receivers, and you know, and they get beat every now and then for a touchdown. They say you got to have a short memory. And you kind of have to. I mean, you got to go. If you thought you made the best decision you could, then you just kind of go, okay, that's how it goes. And I do have a list of those that, you know, getting this interfaith center. I wish we'd done that. You know, when I was mayor, I wished I'd gotten further along on the courthouse. The subsequent mayor dumped that design, put up a new one. The old design I thought was just gorgeous. But I do joust at some windmills. I mean, there is a, and Bruce knows this, there's a funding formula that the governor and the legislature have that's wrapped around some really ridiculous metrics. And I just grouse and grumble and poke and prod and keep trying to stir it up and get them to change it. So some things you just can't give up on. You've got to keep going back and try to get it fixed. And my wife tells me that if I think something has been or somebody has been treated unjustly or unfairly, it just haunts me. And those are the ones I have a hard time giving up on. And actually, I feel good about that, though. You know, I think you should feel good about that if you're trying to fight for what you really think is right.
New England Patriots are having a hard time forgetting.
Well, I'm having a hard time forgetting the Jaguar game too. We was robbed in that game.
Hello, President.
Hello.
So has there been a significant event in your childhood or teenage years that was fundamental in forming your leadership style?
So the question was, has there been a formative event in the president's youth that may have shaped his leadership style?
Yeah, I had a very, quote, normal childhood, whatever that means. I mean, you know, it's the usual broken bones and broken hearts and, you know, screwed up on a test and those kinds of things. But so many people, you know, in the Olympics, you know, when they do those little stories about those athletes, you go, my God, how did they overcome that, you know? And I don't want to say it was an easy childhood necessarily, but you know, we moved a lot. My dad was with General Motors, and those seemed traumatic at the time. But I found in my life the things that I thought were the worst thing in the world to happen to me. Whether it was, a girl dumping me, moving from some town, not getting a job that I really wanted. I tried to get appointed as state attorney when my boss, the state attorney, ran for mayor and had to resign early. I didn't get that. Thought it was horrible because all I wanted to be was a prosecutor. I hated law school. I just loved the courtroom. 4 years later, I was mayor of Jacksonville. Turned out great. And so it seems that God's just kind of been good on opening the right door at the right time. So yeah, I can't say there was a defining event out of childhood. Just a good experience.
I'd like to ask you, aside from your visionary leadership, building around campus, it's beautiful, I love it. What type of advice or leadership would you think that would increase equality and diversity in leadership field, and also increasing awareness with faculty and departments and increasing opportunities for disabled people and whatever?
Yeah. On the list of things that I get really proud of is what we've done at our Disability Resource Center and for students. And again, you can always get better, but quick illustration, we had a sense that we weren't doing a great job. The Vice President, Dr. Gonzalez, was over that, and I said, look, find a school that's really doing this well. Fly up. I'm going to come back to diversity, but fly up there, steal everything you can about what they're doing, bring it back. We're going to put some money into this center because students that have to overcome any kind of disability, we want to have the structures around them to help them. And so he flew up to Ohio State, who had a really good job, spent the day there, and as he was walking back, he said, have you used a consultant to help on this? And they said, yeah. They said, it's some professor down in Jacksonville, Florida. Turned out it was a UNF professor who was one of the leading experts in the field. And at the time, we had about 150 students that were registered with some kind of a disability. We now have about 1,000 from almost every state in the union. We have more deaf students than the rest of the Florida schools combined. For those that aren't on campus every day, if you drive around the loop, you're going to see a kid at least one in a puffer wheelchair. And so I think we've done some good there. That's one that we keep wanting to make sure we do better. Rusty Dubberly, Dr. Dubberly, Dr. Webb prior to that have just done a great job in there, but you can always try to do more. Diversity, we've done very well at student enrollment. We're doing a great job at the staff. We have not done a good job at the faculty level or the very senior leadership on campus. And that has been, we've created a commission on diversity and inclusion. We've pumped money into that. We've been recruiting, encouraging. Faculty hire their own colleagues. I don't hire anybody. I don't hire a faculty member. The departments each hire. Really encouraging and trying to lead that to happen. And I think faculty's hearts are there, but we just haven't been able to recruit as many as we'd like to do. But that's another one of those things that you'd have on the list. I wish we'd gotten to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Okay, Caitlin.
Hello. So my question is in regards to your mention of the word introvert, and my ears kind of perked up at that because according to the MBTI test, I'm 90% introverted. So I think I deserve a round of applause for standing up here right now. Yes.
You apparently have a sense of humor, though. That helps a lot.
Well, thank you. So my question to you is, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you began by saying that being introverted is somehow needing to be overcome when you need to step outside your box and get up and speak in front of people. But then you also emphasized how important introspection is as a leader. And so my question to you is, how would you define introversion, and are you yourself an introvert or an extrovert, and what are the positives of that in terms of leadership? Because I think a lot of times there's this misconception that introverts cannot be a leader per se, and it's very much extrovert dominated.
Yeah, a lot of different ways to go with that. And I'll use Governor Scott as an example. He was not originally a particularly gifted speaker. He's worked at it and worked at it and worked at it, and is now far more comfortable in speaking. I like some of what he says. I don't like what he says about higher ed, but I do think he's done some other things. And so I have to, I mean, I like people, I enjoy people. My wife says I can get a potted plant to tell me their life story. I mean, I do enjoy hearing people's stories, and as a history major, I kind of like stories, and so if you kind of get people to talk. But I have to admit, if I walk into a room and I don't know people in that room, I'm not the one that's going up and sticking my hand out and introducing myself, you know. I kind of try to find somebody and go talk to them and then go from there. It gets easier when you have a title. When you are the mayor of Jacksonville, you don't have to go and make your way around the room. They come to you, you know, and same with the general. That has the generals, you know, and so I think anything, you know, I'm not saying that you've got to, I may have said overcome, but work around it. Use it to an advantage. And I had some staff people that on the Myers-Briggs test were very, very introverted. And we'd have a staff meeting and we'd kick around an idea. And the next day, the two of them would walk in and they'd say, you know, I didn't say it yesterday, but here's 3 things I think we should have thought of. And I'd go, damn it, why didn't you say that yesterday? That changes the whole direction of things. I got to reconvene the whole group. But I later learned that was them, you know, and I tend to like what a friend calls a lot of noise in a decision. I like people talking and arguing and going back and forth and kicking around an idea and looking at it from different angles. But I appreciate people that are a little more reflective and come in the next day. So I learned with those staff members, the decision's not done until about 24 hours because they'll come in at 3 tomorrow and they'll have just a fascinating viewpoint and kind of change things. So, but you know, there are some, there's a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's dated, but it's actually got some tips in it that are pretty good on how to kind of get yourself, how do you go up and shake a hand, get somebody to talk. And but it's not essential. You know, once you work your way up, it's really how you manage and how you lead. Yeah. Good luck, yeah.
Thank you.
And use that humor. That helps a lot, too.
Yeah, she's on her way. And Kelly Harrison is a great resource for the university. I bring Kelly into my class for 2 sessions every semester, and he talks about the Myers-Briggs type dichotomies and does a terrific job. So that's a resource for you, Caitlin, if you need to circle back with Professor Harrison. Okay.
What's next for you?
I don't think there's anybody from the media here, is there? Yeah, I'm going to join a law firm in town, one of Jacksonville's oldest law firms, and also work part-time with a lobbying firm. Both firms are headed by 2 of my closest friends. And so I'm taking the summer off to kind of get reacquainted with my wife. And if anybody has a divorce lawyer, she may need one by the end of August. We'll just see. We'll just see. But yeah, so I'm not going to go away. And I won't be far from UNF. Have the option that the board put in when Bruce was chair to come back and run a center. You know, most presidents, if they're academics, they can get tenured and they'll come back and they'll teach and things like that. But we don't have a law school, so that doesn't fit. And the idea to run maybe a public policy center, you know, governmental policy center, that kind of a thing is still out there. So we'll see how the law business works. I'm deathly afraid I'm going to sit in an office and stare at a non-ringing phone. So we'll. So if any of you have been hurt or injured, June 1 or earlier, look me up. Yeah, 1-800-ASK-JOHN.
Okay, we got a really brave guy in a gator shirt getting ready to ask a question here. Come on, everybody.
Good afternoon. In our leadership minor, we've learned about how leaders project a light, what draws people to you as a person, and they also project a shadow. What do you believe are your lights that's drawn people to you, and what do you believe are your shadows that you've had to overcome, and how have you overcome them?
Lights and shadows. And if this answer doesn't address the question, make sure to come back and steer me in the right direction. I think, let me give one quick anecdote. In the year 2000, when I was mayor, I proposed what we call the Better Jacksonville Plan, which was a referendum for the people to vote on. And it had, the premise was Jacksonville was growing, but there's downsides to growth. The infrastructure falls behind, the environment gets damaged, neighborhoods get leapfrogged. So we put together a $2.25 billion plan that included a lot of roads, bike paths, overpasses, drainage, some 4 buildings downtown, the arena, the baseball park, the library, the courthouse, some environmental projects, et cetera. We packaged them up, $2.25 billion, and it was a half-penny sales tax increase, half cents. So for every $2 purchase, it was an extra 1 penny. And Jacksonville's not known for being, tax friendly. And I put this plan together, my team did. We took a year and a half on it, and floated it by different groups and met with different people, got some input, and changed it as we went along and got input. So we right the night before we were going to take the plan out, a pollster came to me and said, "John, you're going to lose." And I said, "No, I think I can sell this thing. I think these concepts are good." And he says, "Do you want a hatchet in the middle of your forehead?" And I said, "Well, what do I have to lose? If it fails, it's not the end of the world. I'm not getting kicked out of office for it." And I had to say, wouldn't it be a better Jacksonville if we had these listed projects? So it was a half-penny sales tax increase. And thank you. So we rolled it out in May, and then you poll it. We're polling it every couple of weeks to see how it's doing. And I had what's known as favorability ratings of about low 60%, which was decent enough. We polled it 2 months later, and my favorability ratings went into the 70s. And a month after that, mine went into the 80s. And my chief of staff said, we should have proposed raising the damn thing a penny as opposed to a half penny. But what it showed was people wanted to be led. Now, a quarter of the people that said, hey, we like the job that John is doing, voted against that proposal. It passed 58 to 42, which in political terms was a landslide. And so I think people like to be led. So if you're in a leadership spot, the best bet is to say, that's where we'd like to go. People want hope. They want a vision. Without a vision, they say that people perish. That's kind of where they want to go. And it was an interesting lesson to me that people could say, we vote against the signature plan that this guy's endorsing, but we still like him. We still like the fact he made a stab at it. And so I think really that's it. The recession hit, 07, 08 in Florida, and it's been a brutal budget for 10 years. And we've done our best to try to manage it so faculty haven't felt it and students haven't felt it. But it's been a significant job where we've had to squeeze probably close to $10 million out of our budget and redirect it to kind of keep things going. And in those settings, you kind of want to be almost a pastoral thing. You want to try to provide people hope and that you care about what they're going through. And now, did I hit your question? I wasn't quite sure that I've got it.
Yes, sir. I think you hit one of them. But what are your I don't want to say negative, but negative aspects to you? So for me, like a battleground mentality might be something for me. So if someone brings up one point, I always have a counterpoint for it. For instance, do you have any negative traits that you've had to work towards or overcome?
I'll give you my wife's phone number. As I was saying to somebody over here, a strength is a weakness and a weakness is a strength. I mean, I like to debate. I enjoy it. I mean, and I've got a friend that they turn into almost arguments, and I enjoy that, and that helps me think through issues through. Some people don't like it. Some people don't like that, and we try not to be combative unless it's an individual that we can be with each other, a close friend. So I guess, I don't know, that may be kind of a downside of it. You've got to be careful with that. When we did that 360, where we had the consultant come in, she said the one downside, she said, your people have gotten close and comfortable with you, and so sometimes you make a decision that they disagree with. You've got to keep working to let them know that doesn't mean you're disappointed in what they did, and so that's every style has its own consequences, and so you've got to kind of just work with each one, understand what may not work in certain circumstances, and try to not do that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Good luck.
Okay. Heidi.
Hi there, sir. My question for you is, what do you think is the best part of being a leader here at UNF in your time as a president?
Well, students' lives change as a result of what goes on here. And I mean, it's just, 1/3 of our students come from below the poverty line. Their families are below the poverty line. And, if you have a college degree versus not, you're going to make $1 million over your life more. You're going to make $30,000 more per year. And we have students that have come with, a lot of baggage and a lot of things they've had to overcome. Secondly, most of our graduates stay in Jacksonville. They get jobs here, they get internships here, and I think there's close to 90,000 UNF graduates, and the bulk of them are in the Northeast Florida area, and so you get that positive impact on the economy. The faculty, we're not a research-intensive university, but our faculty do a lot of research, and they've got major breakthroughs in things that they're doing, and You know, we've got an urban education program over here to try to figure out the best ways to teach kids that come from, you know, tough urban backgrounds, and there's going to be progress there. I love seeing the progress in the disciplines, the way things have moved ahead. You know, physical therapy 15 years ago, some of the things they did 15 years ago they don't even do today because they've researched and understood there's different ways to rehab a knee and different muscles to work on and that kind of a thing. But probably seeing how students, the value of a college degree, the value of an education. And one of my arguments with Governor Scott, wasn't an argument because you can't argue with the governor, but you know, we went back and forth. But you know, he said, you know, you go to college to get a job, and for most people they do, but not everybody. My wife has 2 degrees, and when I got elected mayor, she stopped working as a nurse because we had 4 kids at home, and I wasn't able to help really as much as I would have wanted to be. And I said, Governor, isn't it better to have an educated, literate citizenry? You know, I mean, I think that's healthy for the state. And yeah, thanks. Yeah. The other one is he said, you know, you go to make a lot of money. And I said, you know, some kids want to be artists, and some kids want to be musicians, and some want to be teachers. And you know, and it's a decent living as a teacher. It's not a great living as a teacher. And I said, and the state's the better for it, thank God, you know. And I forget what the question is now, but I went rambling.
It's fine. The question was, what is the best part of being a leader here?
Yeah, I think it's seeing, and again, it goes to Bruce's point and the general's point. I'm not teaching the classes. I'm hoping to try to make sure there is a classroom and that we're recruiting students and that, you know, the grass is cut and the lights are on and those kinds of things. But seeing those students graduate, it's incredible. The students that are registered in the Disability Center now graduate at almost the exact same rate as a traditional student with almost the exact same GPA. And that's with, in many cases, a considerable disability that these students are having to work through. And that's just wonderful what that Disability Resource Center does for the 1,000 students that are there. We have about 1,000 military, either active duty or veterans. And this is considered one of the better campuses for veterans in the country. You know, all of those are good. All of those are little pieces of a greater good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. We're 15 minutes beyond what I promised the president where we would be, and he's getting ready to go back and being a lawyer again. I'm not sure how much money that would translate into in terms of billing time, but I do want to say thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. Several years ago, President Delaney was the first speaker, the inaugural speaker at the very first Leadership Speakers Bureau. And so it's only fitting, I think, that we have you back as you begin to transition, not retire, transition into whatever the next phase of life is going to be. You've left an indelible mark on the University of North Florida. Your fingerprints are all over this place, and you know, those of us, even those of us who have been here for only a short time, see the kind of leadership manifest in all facets of the University of North Florida. And I think as a population, we're very grateful to you. So thank you very much. Fill out, please.
Thank you.